Long time no talk, at least a long time for me coming to you on these live social media sessions. This is Eric Lay, and I'm a mortgage consultant and producing branch manager at Guaranteed Rate in Boise, Idaho. And I wanted to come and talk to all of you today because, well, quite frankly, it's really hard for my clients. I'm a mortgage lender, so I only work for people that are trying to buy homes with a mortgage, hopefully for me. They're having a hard time trying to make sense of the decision, and inside of the decision, the math behind whether or not it makes sense to buy a home now. As all of you probably know, home prices have risen dramatically over the last several years, and now this year, mortgage rates have risen rapidly as well. So, how do we make sense of whether or not it makes sense to buy a home? Well, in my mind, the best way to do this is just to do a rent versus buy analysis. Meaning, if you're renting a home right now, whether it be an apartment or a single family residence, or maybe you're in one unit of a duplex, whatever it is, staying there and renting or buying a home now, even so with the prices and rates higher. So we're going to dive into that a little bit here. And I want to just share with you the math behind this so we can try to figure out whether or not this do that. So I'm going to use my platform, which is MBS Highway, to help put this together for you. I work primarily in the state of Idaho in the Treasure Valley, the Boise area, so I'm going to use that for my example here. Now, I have a client now that's looking to purchase a home at some place at or under $500,000. Full disclosure, that is just because that's the maximum amount of home with their 5% down scenario that it looks like they can qualify for. So we're going to go with that number. Okay. Now, we have to start with the current scenario. And they're currently renting a home. They're renting a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home over in West Boise, and they're renting for $2,350 per month. Okay. Now, they also have a renter's insurance policy. And let me check my notes here. They are $37 per month. And we looked at how much their rent has been increasing over the last few years. You can kind of see on here that on average, rents are renewing at 8%. They've actually been increasing at 6% per year. So I'm going to leave 6% in there. But even to make this a little conservative, let's put in 5% because here's the thing, and everybody has to know this. Your rents, when you're in an apartment or a house or wherever, they are not going to stay locked in unless you've got a real good guy or a good girl deal. Like rents will just continue to increase. So I'm building in that rent increase because that's part of what's going to happen every year. So I'm going to do 5% for that scenario. Now let's look at the property they're looking at purchasing. Like I said, they're looking at purchasing a home for $500,000. I have the property taxes on a house they're looking at as well, and it's 3225. So $3,225 in annual property taxes. I also have their homeowner's insurance estimate, and it's $850. So we'll get out the old calculator here. $855 divided by 12 months. So their homeowner's insurance is going to cost them $71.25 per month. I honestly don't have any idea what property tax increases are going to be because the counties, the tax levies, all of the taxing districts, they're just going to do what they're going to do. So I'm going to leave that there. Here's the important part of this analysis here, repairs and HOA. And I want to talk to everybody about this just a second. When you own a home, the biggest difference is you have to fix everything. You have to pay for everything, right? When you're renting an apartment or a house and something breaks, you just pick up your phone and you call the landlord and they come and fix it, right? Well, that's all on you when you're the homeowner. There isn't a landlord who's going to send out the maintenance guy or gal to fix the sink or the leaky toilet or whatever the deal is, right? So if we're not building in some numbers to account for those future increases, then we're really missing the boat. And again, it just depends on how much actually is wrong. I'm going to say that $5,000 of repairs of things on average is the number. So if you take 5,000 divided by 12, that's $416.67. So that's what I'm building in is repairs on the things on your house that are going to break. Every year there's things that go wrong. And so $5,000 a year per average. This cost to sell represents the cost of selling the home in the future if you hire a real estate professional to sell that home. That's a typical buy and sell commission combination there. The sellers almost always will pay that commission. So it's 6%, and I'm factoring that into the equation. Okay. Now let's look at the financing that I'm getting them. So they're going to put 5% down. So that's a loan of $475,000. They're getting a 30-year loan, conventional fixed rate. I've got my rate sheet propped up here. You can see this is as of today. I'm coming to you September 29th. And my rate for a 30-year fixed is 6.625 with paying a little over one discount point. Okay. So I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to put 6.625. Mortgage insurance with this customer, they have excellent credit, which is the best part about this. So the mortgage insurance is going to be the cheapest possible. Closing costs, I'm just a little under $10,000 for this scenario. I'm at 9,800 and we worked this up, $9,845. Okay, so here's my scenario. Let's review. We're currently renting for $2,350 per month. They have a renter's insurance policy that they're paying, and I'm assuming their rent is going to increase 5% per year. Here's the house they're buying with the monthly homeowner's insurance, the annual property taxes, the cost to fix the house in the future when things break, right? And then the loan that they're getting at 6.625 on a 30-year fixed. Now, I'm going to tell them that they need to plan to stay in this home for 10 years. I'm going to come back to that in a little bit, but I'm a big believer in the 10-year window. And I'm going to use the forecasted appreciation over 10 years on average, which is lower than the historical average. That might have something to do with how prices have come up so rapidly so quickly, right? So I'm going to use the forecast appreciation of 3.16% per year over 10 years. Let's look at what that means now. Okay, so the first thing I want to call your attention to is this cash flow difference, this big number that I'm showing you here. What that's saying is that over 10 years, it's going to cost this client of mine $117,704 more dollars to buy a home versus rent. $117,704 more to buy a home versus rent. I want to stop and pause, not just for dramatic effect, but to let that sink in, because this is where most people get stuck. This is where they say, why would I buy a home? I can't justify that. I'm going to spend $117,000 more than renting to buy a home. Why would I do that? And that's why it's so hard for people to understand, because what they're looking at is the scenario side by side on a month to month basis. They're not looking at this over a 10-year runway. And that's why you have to do that, because that's when the math starts to really come and make more sense. So let's go back to the analysis here. Given the fact that this home is going to appreciate at 3.16% per year, again, that's the forecasted appreciation rate from MBS Highway. That means that their house is going to appreciate $182,000 from where they bought it in 10 years. So they started at 500,000 where they bought it, and in 10 years it's going to be worth almost $683,000. Not a bad return on that, and that's only 3%. Amortization gain, what does that mean? That means that every single month that you make your mortgage payment, a portion of that payment goes to paying the loan balance down. And we have to remember that, right? Because when you're a renter, every time that you pay your rent, there isn't any return on that, right? That's why we like to say in the industry that rent has a 100% rate of interest. There isn't anything to gain from renting, unless you're the landlord, of course. Okay. So if you think about that payment, every single month that you make a payment and just a little bit of it goes to your mortgage pay down, you get what we call amortization gain. So after 10 years of paying your mortgage, you would have $71,000 in change of additional equity in your home just by paying the mortgage balance down. You can see after 10 years, the balance would be down to just above $400,000. Okay. So now let's factor in everything. Here's the cost to sell the home. Remember, I said that those commissions that have to be paid to real estate agents, typically about 6%. That's $40,000 and $40,937. And that's based on that price in the future that we're estimating to be around $682,000. Okay. I'm not going to get into the tax benefit and the tax bracket. A, I'm not a CPA or a tax professional. And B, Tax deductions and all of that, they just differ based on everybody's tax situation scenario. So I'm not even going to bring that into the equation, although you see it there. I'm going to strip it out later. So let's get to the results. Just by buying a home and committing to keeping that for 10 years means a gain of $101,400. $101,400. Now, again, renting means you have nothing. And again, that's why we say that renting has a 100% interest rate on it. So this person, should they choose to buy a home, is going to gain $101,400 in the future when they sell. And maybe you're having a hard time following that because you're like, wow, they bought it for 500, they sold it for 682. But remember, we're accounting for everything. And I want to take you through that again. I'm accounting for the closing costs that they have to pay on the mortgage just to get the home in the first place. I'm also factoring in the cash flow difference. Remember, it is much cheaper month to month to rent a home versus buy. $117,000 cheaper, right? And I get it. If at that point somebody just can't qualify, then that is what it is, unfortunately. We can't proceed if they can't qualify because the payment's so much higher. But if this client can qualify and the higher monthly payment makes them uncomfortable with this decision, I'm factoring that in, all $117,000 of that over 10 years. Okay. Then the cost to sell. That's the real estate agent's commissions for selling and the one who brings the buyer to you in the future. So I'm taking that out as well. Now I'm factoring in the 182,000 from the appreciation of the home, and I'm factoring the 71,000 for the amortization gain. Now, I said I'd take out the $16,537, so I didn't do that. But if we reduce that from there, we are down to a net gain of about $85,000 for buying a home. $85,000. Okay. Now, the assumptions that I used, I feel are pretty conservative. Okay. We can even go back and tweak this. What if rent actually did increase at 6% per year? You can see that that goes up even more because there's more rent than there is at 6% per year increase otherwise. Okay. I can even come down here and say, well, what if the interest rate was a little bit lower? And I'm not saying that's the case, but what if it was? What if it was 6 3/8? Okay. That's also going to increase the return. Okay. But at the end of this, what I want to make sure that is very, very clear to everybody is that renting versus buying in a vacuum, if you look at it on this scenario month to month, it can be very, very deceiving as to whether or not that makes sense to do, right? Because the rent is so much cheaper than the mortgage on this scenario that I showed you. But that month to month analysis, and I should call it a lack of analysis that sometimes my clients will do, it doesn't factor in the appreciation of the home over 10 years. It doesn't factor in the amortization gain, so paying your mortgage down over the years. And it takes into everything into account when I show that the way that I just showed you. Now, I promised you that I'd talk about why I use 10 years. So let's go back to that. Now, what I've got here in front of you is the all transactions house price index for Boise, Idaho. So again, you can see the numbers on here. These are not price points. That's just what's called a house index. And basically, if you want to know what that means, if you want to say 100, that's what the price of a home was, median price, back in Q1 of 1995. That was baseline for this graph. Okay, 2007. 2007 is when the home prices started to move lower right before the housing crash that everybody's heard about. So that's this big gray bar you see right here, this vertical bar on the screen. That is the Great Recession, the housing recession from 2008 till almost 2010. That had big price drops, and I think everybody's aware of that. But if I'm working on this for someone in Boise, which this scenario was, and I come back here to Q2 of 2007, that's the peak that prices got to the highest point. And you can see the number on the screen there. That index at that point was 214.5. If I come forward 10 years, you can see somewhere right in there, second quarter of 2017, maybe first quarter of 2017, that's the point where home prices from the peak went to the bottom and then came up to be equal. So I feel in my heart of hearts, and if I'm going to effectively and ethically counsel my clients, I have to tell them to look at a 10-year window of home ownership on this purchase, because if the worst housing recession ever, that housing crash that we just showed you, if that was to repeat itself, then it would take 10 years for that home to come back up to the place in time where you bought it at price wise. But again, we have to bring back everything in the analysis, because when you buy a home, even if you don't have any home appreciation, worst case scenario, you still have amortization gain because you're paying off your mortgage just a little bit every single month. So if I go back to that worst case scenario that I just talked about, we would have $73,000 in amortization gain just by paying down the mortgage a little bit each month. I hope this clarifies a little bit for you about the reasons that rent versus buy and that decision that people have can be really hard to make. I know it's a lot of numbers and I know it's a lot of things to think about. And that's why, quite frankly, a lot of my clients just get overwhelmed and sometimes confused as to whether or not that makes sense for their situation. Now, the example that I showed you here, that doesn't apply to everybody's situation. Obviously, everybody's situation is unique and different. It always is. But in this situation, you can see quite clearly, I would argue, that when you factor in everything, including the cost to repair and maintain your home at $5,000 per year, when that's all factored in, it still, for this client, makes sense to purchase a home. I can tell you that this is the exact scenario I ran for these clients. They have decided to move forward and make this offer on their home. I'm going to cross my fingers that their offer is accepted, but you can see what we had to go through to really help them wrap their arms around the true value of home ownership under those assumptions, given a 10-year runway on home ownership in that property. I hope this helped everybody. If you have any questions all about this or a mortgage question or housing question in general, I am always here to help and to be a resource for you. As soon as I end this stream, I'm going to go on and put my comments in the comments section down below. Feel free to reach out to me at any time. Again, this is Eric Lay. I'm a mortgage originator in Boise, Idaho, and I'm always here to help and be a resource for you. Take care and have a great